Jay.
We start a new year on Wednesday. I'm Charlie Sykes, and Sunday Insight starts right now. Good morning and welcome to a special edition of Sunday Insight, our second year in review show. Last week we looked at the biggest stories and the issues of the year. This morning we look back at the people of 2013. For some, 2013 was the best and the worst of years. President Obama was sworn in for his second term, riding the wave of his re-election win, only to end the year with poll numbers in the low 40s. A juicing scandal snares Brewers star Ryan Braun and results in his suspension. The Brewers season is dismal. Packers fight through an injury to Aaron Rodgers. 2013 saw the resignation of the Pope, Benedict, and the election of Pope Francis. We welcomed a new royal baby. Governor Walker became a published author in 2013 with his book Unintimidated. Paul Ryan brokered a budget deal in a divided Congress. Senator Ron Johnson had a dramatic confrontation with Secretary of State Hillary Clinton over what happened to 4 Americans in Benghazi. Parents, meanwhile, cringed at Miley Cyrus's bizarre performance at the VMAs. And we all learned about selfies and their danger. Just ask Anthony Weiner, also known as Carlos Danger. Weiner, by the way, lost his race for mayor of New York, so we probably won't have him to kick around anymore, but there is always that mayor of Toronto. Joining me on our panel this morning, the Milwaukee Community Journal's Mikel Holt, former state representative Michelle Litjens, political strategist Lynne DeBruin, and media trackers Brian Sikma. Okay, so let's start with, up and down. Who had the best year in 2013? Who had the worst year?
Well, I would say actually internationally, President Vladimir Putin scored some pretty interesting points. He had that controversial op-ed he put in the New York Times, blasting President Barack Obama. He comes out and then trying to insert Russian affairs into the civil war in Syria. We had the debate over Iran nuclear weapons. So this guy comes out as pretty good. I think at the state level, I'm going to pick somebody like Senator Tom Tiffany's, hardworking state legislator who engineers the passage of mine reform legislation, now beginning to get more politically active in the state. He's somebody who's on the rise for sure.
Okay, who would you say?
Just too inside baseball. I want to say Chris Christie, who's probably going to be the next president of the United States, despite Time magazine trying to blow him up 3 times the size. For the first half of the year, I would say it would be Barack Obama. Just the first half. Right. Once they clean up all this Obamacare stuff, then it'd be getting back to usual.
Okay, so I didn't get your, who had the worst year? You gave me the best year. Who had the worst year?
The worst year would go to Graham Zielinski, the former Democratic Party of Wisconsin spokesman who first got fired from his job for tweeting that Governor Walker was like Jeffrey Dahmer, then becoming pulled over for his 3rd DUI. This is a guy whose career is not going very well.
Okay, best and worst years.
Well, nationally, I think Chris Christie, because his popularity is growing. He won re-election by a landslide. Locally, I think it's Joe Sanfilippo with all the work that he did with his legislation.
State representative.
Yes, State Representative Joe Sanfilippo. It was his legislation that changed the size and the future of the Milwaukee County Board. Now he's working on reforming mental health. I think the worst year, you have to pick Barack Obama. But locally, I picked the Milwaukee County Board because their pay was cut in half, their term was cut in half, their power was greatly diminished, and they really are the biggest losers.
Michelle Litjens.
The best year, someone that maybe not everyone is familiar with, but Ashton Kutcher, who was a popular movie star. He spoke to on Nickelodeon to the Teen Choice Awards and actually spoke to the teenagers that adore him and said that there is no job that's beneath you. You know, opportunity is hard work, take advantage of it. He stepped out of his comfort zone, and he really impressed me this year, and I think he had a great year.
Okay, so who had the worst year?
Well, I think it's obvious that Barack Obama had the worst year. He completely fell from grace. The children out there no longer adore him, and I think the media is actually starting to fall off his bandwagon, too.
Yeah, I think this one's relatively easy. Who had the worst year? Does anybody in politics have a worse year than Barack Obama, with the possible exception of the mayor of Toronto and Graham Zielinski? Well, especially when you consider where he started, how ambitious he was, what he thought this year was going to be about. You know, and last week we talked about the surprises of the year. You know, 2 big surprises. Number one, the way the mainstream media has begun to turn on him when his credibility began to fall. And one of the most surprising things that I've seen politically in a long time, he's actually not just dropped in the polls into the upper 30s and 40s, but he's also lost young voters. He's losing women, he's lost young voters. And I think just in terms of the overreach of the president, the way he is losing that aura of cool and of competence, evidence. That is a devastatingly bad year. In terms of locally, I agree with Lynn. I mean, did anybody have a worse year than the Milwaukee County Board, which basically disgraced itself, beclowned itself, and is going to have its power stripped rather dramatically from itself. But in terms of a good year, both nationally and locally, look, Paul Ryan, remember, last year, lost an election for vice president. But compare who was more effective this year, Paul Ryan or Joe Biden, in terms of getting things done and in Congress. I don't know whether Paul Ryan's going to run for president. I don't think he's going to. But his stature is actually higher this year than it was last year. And that very, very rarely happens after you lose a national election. So what was the single most memorable moment of 2013? Pick one. Let's go around the table again, starting with Michael Holt.
A few weeks ago, we gave a testimonial to Brother Bob Smith, which really epitomized all he's done for education in Milwaukee. And I'm not just talking about school choice. I'm talking about he's taking kids by the hand and he shepherded them into adulthood. WTMJ, if you recall, can't think of anyone else who deserves the tribute that he received on that day.
Well, I agree with you completely. Michelle Litjens.
You know, I think it has to be when Senator Ron Johnson was interviewing, or had the committee hearing with Secretary Hillary Clinton at the time. I mean, he called her on the carpet. He made her lose her cool at the time.
What difference does it make?
And
it's one of the sound bites of the year.
That was fantastic.
Okay, moment of the year.
Well, for me, it was the April 15th Boston Marathon bombings. I will never forget the images of those bombings, and in particular, the fact that so many onlookers rushed to help the victims instead of running away to safety. And then afterwards, as Boston wrapped all those victims up in a lot of security and you know, collegiality and comfort and care, that to me is a biggie for this year.
Brian Sikma.
Well, there's several bad actors in this tale, but it was in early October when we found out that the John Doe investigation, yet another secret probe into conservative political activities, was unfolding in Wisconsin. Again, this one led by a Democratic District Attorney's Office and led by individuals with liberal partisan leanings at the Government Accountability Board. That was a devastating piece of news to come out. I think it was very chilling and very concerning.
Well, I had two, and one was already taken by Michelle Litjens, because I do think that confrontation back in January between Ron Johnson and Hillary Clinton is going to be something that is going to hang over her head for the next 3 years. That soundbite where she clearly is losing her cool and goes, "What difference at this point does it make?" is going to be in ads hundreds of times, thousands of times between now and her presidential run. But the other really memorable moment of the year, and you mentioned this on last week's show, Michelle, was when those World War II veterans showed up at the World War II Memorial. They found the Obama administration had shut it down, and they decided, you're not stopping us. We came a long way. We paid our dues. And they shoved their way through the barriers. And as one of them said, you know, when we got there at Normandy, that was closed too. Rising stars of 2013 and those who were missing in action. And Sunday Insight continues.
Eye care professionals. Call to set up your personalized screening today.
Nationally and locally, there were fierce debates over issues ranging from gay marriage to gambling to education reform. Both liberal and conservative women were in the news in 2013. Tammy Baldwin becomes a United States Senator. Madison millionaire Mary Burke jumps into the race for governor. Former Lieutenant Governor Margaret FARROW wins the inaugural Margaret Thatcher Award. And Jessie Rodriguez becomes the first Latina Republican elected to the Wisconsin State Legislature. But who were the rising stars of 2013, both at the national level and local level? We'll start with you, Michelle.
Well, at the national level, I think it has to be Dr. Ben Carson. No one really knew who he was before he spoke at the National Prayer Breakfast. They really gave it to the president, right? And now he's actually become a national spokesman. He's on talk shows all over the country on a regular basis, and he's got a great story to tell. Locally, I believe it's State Representative Joe Sanfilippo. When he was first elected, he wanted to reform the Milwaukee County Board. He came in, and even before he was even before he officially became a state representative, before he was sworn in, he was writing that legislation to take care of and fix Milwaukee County and protect the taxpayers here.
Okay, Lynne DeBruin.
Well, I think nationally, it's Kirsten Gillibrand, who's a junior senator from New York. She, in 2011, some people started to hear her because she was one of the leaders in changing the military's don't ask, don't tell policy. But most Americans had not heard of her until this year, when she was the lead author of legislation that would have removed sexual assault cases from the military military chain of command. That didn't actually go through, but it forced a compromise bill, and it gained her a national spotlight. Locally, I think in addition to Joe, we've got at the county board level, you've got David Bowen and Russell Stamper, and also at the common council level, you've got Mandela Barnes.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to disagree
Sikma.
with Michael Holt.
Yeah.
Michael said that he thought that Chris Christie had a good year. I'm going to say a national rising star is Governor Scott Walker here in Wisconsin. This year he released his book. It's now been out. He's been on the hit the national lecture circuit. And what's fascinating is nearly 3 years after he entered the national spotlight with his historic collective bargaining reforms, his stock is as high now as it's ever been. And that spells a lot of good things for his future political career.
Okay. Michael Holt.
They stole it. Look at my notes and just stole every.
Yeah.
Locally is Russell Stamper and David Bowen, and I say this because they're going to do something unique with politics. They're going to actually do something. They're going to advance an agenda, which is unusual. Nationally, I think it's going to be Chris Christie. I think he's going to be the first Republican president in the last 10 years. You want to write this down?
Yeah, I was going to write down. Michael
Write it
Holt,
down.
wrong on this one. I actually agree with Brian Sikma. Sometimes I think we get too close to things. Scott Walker is definitely a rising star nationally. He's got that book out, is getting a lot of national buzz. He's not showing much in the polls presidentially right now, but when you look at the Republican field, who's going to be the last man standing who is acceptable to all of the wings of the Republican Party? And
Chris Christie.
But Walker I would think would also fit that bill. There's no question that Chris Christie had a really, really good year. In terms of rising stars locally, there are a number of them. State Representative Dale Koinga, who I had mentioned before, was key in discovering the UW slush fund and was the pivotal figure in pushing through the big $600 million tax cut. But also closer to home, two young women, Deanna Alexander and Jessie Rodriguez. These are two women you need to keep your eye on. These are the rising stars. I think they're going to go far, and they're going to get a lot of national attention because of the things they represent and the things they're talking about. Okay, on the flip side, MIA. Who was on the milk carton? Who was missing in action? Let's go around the table. Michael Holt, you're first.
Well, I'm sad to say that the mayor was. I expect more out of a mayor. He's an excellent administrator, but we need vision. We need for him to get out here and change this city around. We need him possibly to take over NPS. We need him to take over everything. And let's see if we can move forward that way.
Okay, Michelle Litjens, who is missing in action?
Well, I agree about the mayor, but also Eric Holder. I think if we look back at this spring when he testified before a committee hearing, and he said, when they asked him questions about the NSA and the IRS, he said, "I don't know," 57 times. We haven't heard from him since.
Okay, who's missing in action?
The Milwaukee Public School Board and Superintendent Greg Thornton, with the test scores in some of the worst in the country. If you go on the site, you'll see that Thornton doesn't even talk about the low test scores. The actual website itself talks about how they were getting incremental gains and doesn't mention that the scores themselves are so low it's ridiculous. And then if you look at the school board minutes, they've never even had it as an agenda item this year. So that to me is the ultimate in a missing in action.
Brian Sikma.
Well, this only applies to a very narrow range of time because it would be deeply unfair to characterize him as missing in action for the rest of the year. But Governor Scott Walker and this whole Kenosha casino deal has been pretty much missing in action. He began by writing several letters to the public explaining what he was going to do to decide the fate of the casino, but then he disappeared from sight after putting out several deadlines that then came to pass. So I think hopefully next year we'll get a decision on this deal, but for that issue, it's kind of a reversal of what we've seen as Governor Scott Walker, the strong leader in the state of Wisconsin.
Well, I strongly agree with what you said, Lynn. I mean, in terms of the kind of numbers that we've been seeing on these test scores, the lack of outrage, the lack of interest, the silence, the crickets that we get from not just the school board and the system, but the entire political community is stunning. But my choice for the missing in action is United States Senator Tammy Baldwin. Whatever happened to her? Really, give us a call if you know. Now, think about the most cringeworthy moment of 2013. We've been thinking about it. We'll hand out the Miley Cyrus Award. In 2013, we said goodbye to Margaret Thatcher and Nelson Mandela, but also to novelist Tom Clancy, pianist Van Cliburn, anti-American dictator Hugo Chavez, film critic Roger Ebert, TV personality David Frost, actress Annette Funicello. Feel old already? Actors James Gandolfini and Peter O'Toole, former Surgeon General C. Everett Koop. We also said goodbye to Hall of Famer Stan Musial, former New York Mayor Ed Koch, Pauline Phillips, the advice columnist better known as Dear Abby, rock star Lou Reed, comedian Jonathan Winters, and chef Charlie Trotter. But let's handle some more year-end awards. Single out somebody who deserved a Profile in Courage Award for the year. Lynne DeBruin, you start.
I think Malala, the 16-year-old Pakistani girl who was shot the year before, and she continues to speak out on educating women despite Taliban threats against her life.
Excellent. Michelle.
Gregory Hicks, the former deputy chief of mission in Libya, who was there, called for backup, and he spoke up against Susan Rice, and they demoted him to a desk job, and yet he still had the guts to go testify and tell the truth in front of a congressional hearing.
Very good. Michael Holt.
Well, I think of the sheriff's deputy who was shot 17 times in their shooting on the south side. He's asking people to contribute blood.
Okay, Brian Sikma.
Well, I'm going to hand out two Profile in Courage Awards. One to Congressman Darrell Issa of California, chairman of the House Oversight Committee. His committee has been relentless, hauling Obama administration officials before it to testify about Benghazi, IRS scandal, and the failure of the Obamacare website. And then our own Senator Ron Johnson, as has been mentioned. He called Secretary of State Hillary Clinton to account, and that moment, I think, will be used and will dog her future political career. And for being able to use his position on the Foreign Relations Committee for that purpose, I think was worthy of an award.
Well, I agree with Johnson, not only for standing up to Hillary Rodham Clinton, but also for standing up to some of his fellow conservatives in taking, common sense approaches to some of these budget issues. Locally, I named her a rising star, but Deanna Alexander, who was a whistleblower willing to stand up against the hacks and the bullies in the Milwaukee County Board, was somebody willing to buck the leadership. Very rare in Milwaukee politics. Now, let's hand out the Miley Cyrus Award for the most cringeworthy performance by a person in the public eye. Michael Holt, you are first.
Cringeworthy?
Cringeworthy.
Cringeworthy. I had to say my dear old president who said you could keep your insurance if you wanted to.
Okay, Michelle Litjens. Whoa, wait, did you just break that on Obama again? Okay, all right, Michelle Litjens.
Okay, so we might have all forgotten this already, but during the Super Bowl last year, this January, do you remember that commercial where that model was kissing that nerdy guy?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's bad. Mine is Rob Ford, the mayor of Toronto. His crack cocaine smoking, drunken binges, and driving under influence. He's become the gift that keeps on giving to comedians.
Okay, Brian Sikma.
Well, it wasn't morally scandalous, but it was pretty outrageous when Congresswoman Gwen Moore jumped on the back of a Harley, proverbial Harley, with Stephen Colbert this year. It was quite shocking and quite entertaining, though, for those of us on the other side of the aisle.
Now I got this image in my mind somehow of Gwen Moore and Rob Ford, the mayor of Toronto, together. It was okay. Next on Sunday Insight, each of our panelists will select their Person of the Year. First, here's your morning news update. Time magazine named Pope Francis as its Person of the Year. Good choice, but not the final word. So to wrap up this year-end review, pick a Person of the Year. One national, one local. Let's start with Michael Holt.
Local to be Brother Bob Smith, and national, my man, deceased, unfortunately, Nelson Mandela.
Michelle Litjens.
My national Person of the Year is Medal of Honor winner Captain William D. Swenson for his 2009 heroic acts in Afghanistan. Swenson was ambushed and ultimately surrounded by an enemy calling for his surrender. With complete disregard for his own safety, he led a team under enemy fire to retrieve the bodies of fallen soldiers while saving the lives of many others. Swenson is an American hero. My local Person of the Year persons are Mark and Mary Gundrum for their incredible journey with their son Dominic Pio. Dominic was born with a serious birth defect, but Mark and Mary never lost their faith. They found a very talented doctor at Boston Children's Hospital who was able to perform a miracle surgery. You are an example to everyone that faith can save us all.
Lynne DeBruin.
Well, naturally, my Person of the Year is Pope Francis. He's been Pope for only 9 months, but he's already become a worldwide symbol of Christian grace and concern for the poor, and his humility has endeared him to millions. My local person is Paul Ryan, because he actually delivered the goods as a politician. Ryan and Democratic Senator Patty Murray successfully negotiated a bipartisan budget that passed the Senate for the first time in years. Ryan has achieved what the public wants: politicians of both parties working together to actually make government function.
Brian Sikma.
Well, my national Person of the Year is Edward Snowden. The National Security Agency contractor infamously filched mountains of classified files in a despicable theft of national secrets. His misguided actions generated an international incident and an ongoing national debate over secrets and security. And my state Person of the Year is State Representative Dale Kooyenga. The second-term lawmaker was the architect of the sweeping income tax cut signed into law by Governor Scott Walker in June. His success marks the impact that new conservative lawmakers are having on the establishment in Madison.
Well, nationally, my person of the year is, wait for it, Kathleen Sebelius, the person at the center of the most spectacularly botched government program rollout in the history of mankind. Her incompetence reshaped the political landscape maybe for a generation. Locally, my persons of the year, the organizers and volunteers of Stars and Stripes Honor Flight. An amazing story becomes even better. They have managed to fly thousands of World War II vets to see their memorial in Washington, D.C., and this year they began flying Korean War vets. They've touched hearts, changed lives, and made all of us proud. Thanks for joining us for our Year in Review show. Next week, we'll look forward to the year ahead, and have a happy new year.